Welcome to episode 152 of the Half Point Per Podcast. I'm your host, Evan Riggs, joined as always by my co-host, Dalton Willie, and producer, Johnny Pham. We finally have real football to talk about, guys. Week one, I mean, it went exactly how we all thought, right? Like we all had that one pegged from the get-go. Everything we said came true.
Every bet hit.
Every bet.
Parlay was alive.
Yep.
I told everybody, Justin Fields.
That is true. That I don't want to say it's hilarious that Russ got hurt. I don't mean it like that, but it is hilarious that he ends up starting week one after you make him a sleeper call. And it's almost like, who do you know in Pittsburgh, and what did they do to Russell Wilson's leg? Is like kind of where I was at on Sunday morning.
I know people. People talk. I had some connections in Denver that followed him to Pittsburgh.
Oh God! All right. I had another thought to add after that. Now I just don't remember. So, like I said, week one, everything we said was right. Everything we said was going to happen was going to, etc., etc. But that's not going to stop us from panicking or not panicking today, Dalton. We've got some fun panic meter topics coming up a little bit later in the show. But before we get to that, because I know Johnny has to dip out pretty early today. Although, Johnny, it's nice of you to pull a Russell Wilson, show up like fully dressed, fully in uniform, like you look like you're ready to go for this podcast. So I appreciate that. But Dalton, I know you've got a little Tuesday night update that we're all waiting to hear.
Yeah. I've just been doing so well with my gambling lately. I've been around a lot of sharks, and I figured it was time to learn to swim. So we got some Tuesday night, some Thursday night swim lessons. Thursday night is before Thursday Night Football. It was verified. It was confirmed. The people are excited. First round of swim lessons, me and two other adults. One of them knows how to swim. The other one does not. For whatever reason, the swim instructor decided that I was going to be the proverbial teaching dummy. And moving your legs in water is not the same as moving it in air. I'll say that much.
Above water.
No, they have to be underwater.
So what happened when you were the teaching dummy?
There was a point where the very nice and considerate teacher said, "You're so good at this, you don't need the board. And the board's what keeps you afloat." And I said, "No, I think I do." And she said, "No, just put your legs out and kick." I didn't know 3.5 feet of water was that deep, but we found the bottom real fast.
Oh man, I love that you said it's two adults in these lessons with you, because Alex, my wife Alex, when she was informed where you were at earlier this evening, she asked, "Is it just him and a bunch of kids or what?"
They are for adults. If they were children's swim lessons, nobody on this planet but myself would know I was at them.
So what, do you know the other two adults?
Well, one of them is Kathleen, so I do know one of them.
Oh my God, she's doing them with you. I love that.
And then the other
one.
one.
Okay, so she's the one who knows how to
sucks.
swim.
Yeah, no, she knows how to swim. Yeah, that's bad.
That's terrible. Who's the other person?
A nice mother with 2 children who's learning to swim to make sure her children are okay.
So Kathleen is also just in the class for you? That sounds terrible.
Johnny, as somebody who I know cannot swim on this podcast, what would you do?
I would also take swim lessons. I'll take swim lessons also, but by myself. I don't need my significant other also there.
So what I'm hearing, Johnny's going to be in town for a whole week. We get little Johnny Dalton swim lesson tag team.
Come on down. It's supposed to be 5 people. There are only 3. There's
where is this at?
I'm not going to dox my location, but it's right here in Kansas City, super close to where I live.
Is it like a Planet Fitness or like
it's a community center?
Oh, okay. All right.
Full indoor pool.
I hope you know that. Okay, so these swim lessons are for about a month, right? That's what you said?
They will end in exactly a month, yes. We're
not
counting days.
I think you are, it seems like. So two things. Number one, if Johnny actually goes and participates in said swim lessons, I may have to go over there and video said swim lessons for content.
No videos.
Number two, this is going to be the best like podcast supercut ever in a month from now when I have all of these different one-liners from you put together in a video. I mean, I don't know if the Shark He Has a Family will be my favorite super.
I will say, I now understand why it was so hard for Austin Eckler to run quick last year. I can't move that fast in water either.
The line of you saying 3.5 feet of water, I didn't realize that was so deep. That's sticking around for quite some time.
Oh no, I've made so many mistakes.
All right, Johnny, if feel free to stay or get out of here, whatever you want to do. We're going to move on to Panic Meter. Pretty self-explanatory here, Dalton. Week one, we were obviously being sarcastic and saying that everything we said was going to happen. Week one is the most unpredictable week of the season because it is the least information that we're dealing with the whole year, obviously. With that said, there are a lot of things that happen week one where, okay, maybe it is kind of predictive of things to come. There are a lot of other things that happen in week one where you look back at previous years and you're like, man, remember when so-and-so finished as a top 10 wide receiver week one? Like, there's a lot of that. So we're going to try and kind of break it down and try and tell you what's real and what's fake the best that we can through 1 week. And we're going to start, Dalton, with what I think was probably not fantasy football, or maybe close, but probably the biggest football storyline in week one, and one of the bigger fantasy football storylines in week one because of who his teammates are, and that's Kirk Cousins. I mean, they pulled a Chiefs and lost to the Steelers on 6 field goals, 18-10. Only this one was not a playoff game. Kirk Cousins goes 16 of 26 for 155 yards, 1 touchdown, 2 picks. And their next 4 games are the Chiefs, not in this order, but Chiefs, Eagles, Saints, and Bucks. So realistically, 0-3, very possible. And I saw a stat today, it's like 6 of the last 247 teams start 0-3 have made the playoffs. And I mean, like 0-5, 1-4, if this is what we're getting out of Kirk Cousins, not out of the realm of possibility. But what were your thoughts after watching one game of Kirk Cousins where he was very clearly a shell of his former self?
I mean, the panic meter's high. Let's start off just by saying the Steelers.
Oh, yeah, I should have said, and I don't think we even talked about this. We can just off the cuff here. Panic meter will go a number between 1 to 10 for each guy.
I'm going to go 9.
Okay.
So we know the Steelers is a good defense, but the problem is with the way the Falcons attacked it was not indicative that they had trust in their quarterback. So the 2 lowest pass rates over expectation last week were both in this game. The Steelers had the lowest and the Falcons had the second lowest. That's not what you expect when you sign a $90 million contract for the next 2 years to a quarterback. And they didn't play the way that you think they would play with a quarterback like Kirk Cousins. They were the team with the second most offensive plays out of the pistol, only beat by Miami, which runs the pistol a lot differently to get their extravagant looks. And Kirk Cousins had a career low play action percentage. So he had a 2.7 play action percentage. 1 play resulted in play action in all of his dropbacks, which is the lowest of his career. And I think a lot of it is said that this staff is very concerned about that plant foot and about Kirk Cousins' health.
So I have some stats to kind of bolster what you're saying here. I want to just throw out real quick before we get too far off of that topic. He ran 10.4 miles per hour was his highest top speed per next gen stats. That was his lowest in 7 years. He did not do a single thing in the game that actually qualified as sprinting. He ran for just 46 yards at a speed of more than 6.5 miles per hour across 50 snaps, which is the lowest in his career by a considerable margin. The Falcons ran the ball 81% of the time out of the pistol formations you're just talking about. They did not run the ball 1 time out of the shotgun formations, and I think they took just 4% of their snaps under center. You said the lowest play action of his career. I don't think he ran. It was either 1 or 0 play action passes in that game. And when your offense is that predictable, like I don't know if you read the ESPN Insider article by Ben Solak today. There's a clip of Patrick Queen. Like, it's like an NCAA when you're trying to guess the play and you just take your linebacker and you sprint at the line of scrimmage, hoping it's a run. That's what he did, but he did it because he knew they were that they were in pistol, so they were going to run the ball. So it was bad.
Yeah. And I mean, Kyle Pitts got a touchdown. Some positive there. But like the pick he had where Drake London had a comeback, and he knew what the read was. He knew that London was going to be open if he hit his timings, and he was probably a second to 2 seconds late, and it resulted in a pick because he's not processing as quickly, because he's not getting to his reads quickly, because he can't move his feet as quickly. And this isn't an offense that we thought was going to run the ball this heavily. It's an offense that's clearly trying to accommodate a need, and most likely around what we saw with Kirk Cousins. The offensive line, it's not the best in the league, but it's not what we saw on Sunday. So, I mean, there's a lot of high valued players in this league, in this offense for fantasy, and it's really disconcerting to see that outcome, especially against a Steelers defensive front that's really good, but their secondary is middling. I mean, Dante Jackson with the pick six and the coverage on Drake London, he was a player the Panthers let walk despite the traded, despite the fact that they have huge holes all over their defense.
Yeah. So per Next Gen Stats, Kirk Cousins moved an average of 3.1 yards per dropback, which is the least dropback movement he's had in a single game of his career by more than a full yard. Like, that isn't just being a pocket passer. That is literally not moving. And that is just not a sustainable way to play in today's NFL. And that, on top of, you mentioned it a little bit, with just the plant foot, not having the confidence in his throws, not having the zip on his throws. If you just go back and watch some of the all 22 angles, I mean, you can see him kind of, I guess, like kind of pull up lame a little bit on some, like where you would normally see him step in and kind of let it rip. That wasn't happening. So yeah, I'm going 10 here. And I mean, Matt Harmon made the case today, and I am not sure I'm all the way there, but I'm definitely willing to listen. Like, if the Falcons benched him tomorrow, I would say, you know what, that I can't say that's a bad idea. Will it get better? Maybe, but I mean, he's in his mid-30s. This is a very serious injury, and like we talked about a lot with he and Rodgers, it is on a less advantageous foot for a quarterback for Kirk than with Rodgers. So I'm very concerned, and obviously that concern trickles down to the other fantasy weapons, where you're right, like they're going to have more success against other defenses that are not as good as Pittsburgh, but they're not going to be able to run the ball how we like them to if teams know it's coming. You know, like teams, if they can just sit on their stuff, and that's just a major concern right now.
I mean, the Penix pick just makes more sense.
The pick makes sense. So I think my issue with it always was, if the pick makes sense, then the move to sign Kirk Cousins was idiotic. And if the pick ended up not making sense because you have Kirk Cousins, then the pick was idiotic. Like, both of those things together can't be a net positive. Like, drafting Penix at 8, like, that could be a totally defensible move, but why are you giving Kirk Cousins $40 million? Like, maybe between when they signed him and the draft, they discovered more health issues and it was worse than they thought. But like, I'm just some idiot who talks on this podcast as a hobby. And even I was like, I'm a little concerned because of which foot it was on. Like, you know, I think this was just a case of owner sees good quarterback, wants good quarterback, let's pay a good quarterback. And that's what happened. And it may have been a disaster, although we will get to bigger disaster quarterback decisions later on in the show.
Yeah, I mean, it's just hard to defend. If he's not healthy now, I don't know how you get better throughout the season. It's going to be a rough, tumultuous run. And maybe the Steelers have had his number.
What you hope is it's confidence. What you hope is that he just becomes more confident in stepping into stuff, and it's less health, more mental, which that does happen with injuries. But yeah, it's just a very, very scary spot that he's in and where he's kind of starting from this year. And boy, a guy who is starting from a scary spot this year, literally starting from a scary spot, interception, his first play of the game. That's Bryce Young. I mean, 13 of 30, 13 of 31. His team got absolutely destroyed. I think it was 47-10, 30-3 or something at halftime. He was 27th in EPA per play among quarterbacks. A lot of fading away instead of stepping up in the pocket to make throws from Bryce Young. Yeah, I'm giving this one an 8. I can't quite go 10 like Kirk Cousins if I'm setting the 10 as the Kirk Cousins bar, but we just haven't seen him really show anything, Bryce Young, to show us that he's capable of being a good NFL quarterback. Do I still think he has the tools? Yeah, I do still think he has the tools to be like a good in it, like a Kirk Cousins level NFL quarterback, but he just needs to show us something really soon. He needs to show us he can step up in the pocket and actually make plays in the pocket because he can't do all out structure. He's making inaccurate throws because he's trying to fade away and throw. He's pressing. Like, it's really ugly. And obviously, just like with Kirk Cousins, we're less concerned about him and more concerned about like Deontay Johnson, who we both loved. And for right now, it's Chuba Hubbard. When Jonathan Brooks is maybe back and healthy at some point this season, maybe it's Brooks, who we're wishing could be better, but is being weighed down by this offense. But right now, it's an 8 for me. And like, it doesn't have to get worse for this number to go higher. It's just if we get like another 2-3 weeks of this, I mean, he could legitimately get benched at some point this year because I don't know what Dave Canales can draw up to fix what I saw the other day.
Yeah, I'm at a 7, so I'm equally concerned. And this is obviously an offense I was very bullish on coming into the season. The first thing I'll say is the Saints do have a good defense. Dennis Allen is a defensive-minded head coach, and this is where they hung their hats last year. They were pretty positive on turnover differential. They were able to disrupt the pocket. So it could have very well been a buzzsaw against the first time this offense is trotted out against somebody on the field. It's concerning that, I mean, the things that we saw on the preseason drive we really liked didn't occur. For instance, he wasn't getting to roll out of the pocket and getting movement because the biggest concern with Bryce Young is that he is not an NFL caliber athlete. He can be a processor, but he does not have the athletic traits to do it. And that was really on display. I mean, the first interception, he airmailed right over his player because he didn't have the power to kind of tuck it in there. And then 2 plays later on his next interception, it was the same situation where he didn't break the pocket in time and he wasn't able to get his play. But there also weren't good reads on this offense. So I found this interesting. Last year, Baker Mayfield said one of his biggest critiques of Canales was he wasn't able to make hot reads. And then,
really? I had not seen that.
Yeah. And that only surfaced today because Alontae Taylor, who's a cornerback for the Saints, for those who don't know, had 2 free blitzes where he sacked Bryce Young in this play. And on both those reads, it was very obvious he was lining up. If you go watch all 22, he's adjusted towards the line of scrimmage. He's moving in before the pre-snap goes on. And there's no.
Were you and Eli watching the all 22 of the Saints game? Is that what happened?
No, just me. When I'm bored at work now, it's all 22 time. And he just doesn't make the read. And there's nobody picks up the blitz. And Alontae Taylor's in the backfield in the first 3 seconds of the snap. And no quarterback's going to get anything going there. There has to be a pickup on that blitz. So largely concerned about that. And then my boy Deontay Johnson is back in hell. He had 6 targets. 50% of them were deemed uncatchable. So we're right back to last year with Kenny Pickett. So pretty worried about this offense. I would like to see them against maybe a lighter defense that doesn't throw some interesting blitz packages at them and see if they can't handle the game a little better. But it's not looking pretty.
Yeah, I don't have much more to add. We can move to the other side of the field in this game with the New Orleans Saints. And I mean, they're 47-10. There's not much to be concerned about, but there was one thing that didn't happen in this 47-10 win, and that's Chris Olave. 2 catches, 12 yards. I don't even know if he had 2, 3, 4 targets. I don't know. I'll go first here. I mean, I put it on here because I feel like if you box score watch, you see Chris Olave 2 for 12, you see Shaheed at a long touchdown. You're like, man, what the hell? I mean, I have this as a 1. Like, they were ahead so quickly and so instantly in this game. They were just on cruise control for 2.5 quarters, basically, in this game offensively. Like,
Red Zone stopped showing the game in the fourth quarter. Like,
yeah, and I would every now and then like open up just the ESPN like Gamecast of it and be like, oh, Taysom Hill run. It's like, so we're to this portion of the program already, and it's 1:15. Like it was just not a competitive game. And the two things that I'll say for Chris Olave, last year the Saints were last place in the NFL in pre-snap motion and in play action. This is only 1 week, so this is not indicative of what it'll be the whole season, but we hope there would be more of it. They were first in pre-snap motion in week 1 and third in play action. Like, if that continues, Chris Olave is going to eat eventually in this offense. And if there's somebody who is like extremely panicked for some reason or like wanting to sell him for 85 cents on the dollar, I'm pouncing on that every time.
Yeah, and I have it at a 3, so like I'm really not concerned. You hit it with the pre-snap motion rate. They were second in the NFL. They didn't do that at all last year. That's very exciting. It looks like Kubiak did bring an offensive mind to that room. I mean, in the third quarter, they were running like some of the silliest shit ever. They ran Taysom Hill on a slant route and threw it to him, and I legitimately think they were just like, let's see what we can throw out there. Foster Moreau and Juwan Johnson were their prime end zone targets. Yeah. They went like deep into the playbook for plays that they're never going to call all season to see how they work.
Yeah, look, like if a team's not going to make you put anything on film, why are you going to put anything on film?
Yeah. So I'm not overly concerned about it. And like we all knew Shaheed was going to get his, and he got it exactly how we thought, which was on a deep post route where the corners blew the coverage. And this is a bad defense where they didn't have to play good ball. I mean, Derek Brown is now out for the season. He was their best defensive player by a mile.
Yep. Agreed. Okay. The Green Bay Packers, who, for 95% of this game, you're like, okay, they may have lost, but I'm feeling pretty good about where things stand with Green Bay. But alas, Jordan Love gets injured on one of the last plays, if not, I think the second to last play. Then Malik Willis has to come in and do a
dirty fail. I really feel like.
Really, I honestly haven't gone back and watched it. I was watching live, but I haven't really watched a replay. Packers offense without Jordan Love, what is your panic level?
Oh, I'm at a 10. And I wouldn't be at a 10 if it wasn't for them committing to Malik Willis as their starting quarterback. So,
I mean, like, could we get Ryan Tannehill in the building for 3 weeks? Like,
I mean, when a team is unserious about their backup quarterback, we saw this last year so often that it can really cost you dividends. Kansas City, when they lost Mahomes, had Chad Henne come in, and he was relatively like not bad enough that the offense couldn't move the ball. But we've seen Malik Willis with the Titans, and I mean, you have to get really creative. And the problem is they did exactly what we thought they were going to do, and they rotated their entire wide receiver core. So there's nobody to rely on for production. If you sat me down today, I would still start Jaden Reed because he has the rushing upside, and I would start Josh Jacobs, and everybody else on that team is untouchable.
That is exactly what I was going to say. Like, I think my concern level on the whole is like a 7, but that's because you can't not start Josh Jacobs. He looked. I know the start was slow. I don't think it was his fault. It just wasn't being blocked up in the first half, and lo and behold, when it started getting blocked up, he kind of looked like Josh Jacobs, pretty explosive, making guys miss, good power, all that stuff. Looked pretty good down the stretch of that ball game. And then like Jaden Reed, you mentioned the running stuff, and not just the running, but like think about all the short passes that can be designed to Jaden Reed that were designed to Jaden Reed last year. Like his volume is probably going to go up. This is just a guess. So the obviously take this with a massive grain of salt, but just thinking about the type of player he is and the type of player Malik Willis is, which is not a good quarterback, like Jaden Reed should be the guy that they try to work the ball to in layup situations as much as possible. He's not going to go 4 for 138 with Malik Willis. He's not going to have those downfield opportunities, but like I think you're probably still starting him. And then, like, Christian Watson, yeah, he can make a big play and he makes your week, but, he only had 2 catches with Jordan Love as the quarterback. Romeo Dubs, I think, had 3. It's like those guys do more downfield, less underneath yak stuff consistently, although Watson can do a little bit of that just over the middle at least. But I just can't. I don't see how you start those guys. I don't see how you start a tight end, and obviously not thinking about a backup at this point. So offense on the whole, I'm like a 7. Starting those top 2 guys still, and just you just gotta let those other guys sit there for a couple of weeks and hope that Jordan Love is back in 3 weeks or so.
Yeah, I mean, I hope they run out against the Colts this week with wishbone offense with Josh Jacobs and Jaden Reed in their triple option sets. Like that is the solution here. I know it's 1 snap and it's a Hail Mary, but like Malik Willis getting sacked on that snap is what we're going to see so much of. Like we saw him in Tennessee, and he is just not a passer. And there's a reason he got cut on a rookie contract. And yeah. I can't see this working out for them in any way that unless their defense opens up a real can of whoop ass on some teams, they're not going to win.
Yeah, agreed. Real quick before we move on, in the chat, Dan Barhaum is asking Bucky Irving or Gabe Davis. He's asking about waiver wires. Before that, I don't know about you, Dalton, but I feel like I kind of know what Gabe Davis is, and like, is he going to give me some weeks that pay off for fantasy? Yeah, he might, but I just like largely don't really care to have that on my roster unless I really need a receiver. Whereas Bucky Irving is he's still kind of a mystery box. He got a lot of action week 1, and I just kind of want that running back on the end of my bench just to see what happens.
Yeah, I would say I would pick up Bucky Irving for a couple of reasons. One, I do think the call out on Gabe Davis is interesting. He played in 2 wide receiver sets. He also led the team in yards per target. He didn't have any drops, and like he was better than what we saw his last year at Buffalo. But similar to Evan's sentiment, I think a lot of your league mates are going to be like, it's Gabe Davis. Like, fool me once, shame on you.
Yeah.
So let him do it again on the waivers. I mean, if he gets picked up, he gets picked up. But for Bucky, he was a more efficient runner than Rachaad White was. Rachaad White still did his thing in the passing game. Yep. But the efficiency on his rushes alone was like 3rd in the league. There's going to be more work for him, and I would be interested in how they utilize him in some of those tighter game scripts because they kind of ran away with this one. And I mean, you just want the mystery bag. Like upsides, Gabe Davis is like wide receiver 23, 24, and that's when the Jaguars decide to pass it more than 21 times a game, which they did last week. So I would take Bucky Irving. And also just with the way the Jags playoff luck all season last year and to start this year has been, Gabe Davis has some like monumental drops coming just because that's a cursed franchise at this point.
Speaking of 2 receiver sets, Jaden Reed's still not playing in them. I would advise the Packers to make that change pretty quickly. He should be in those 2 receiver sets. Okay. The Bengals. Oh man. Bengals are starting to become repeat offenders on these early panic meter shows. I mean, I don't think any team messed up as many eliminator pools as the Bengals, losing 16-10 to the Patriots. And, yes, there was a drop touchdown pass. There was a fumble at the goal line. Burrow was 17th in EPA per play, so not terrible, but, this is Joe Burrow. You expect better than 17th in EPA per play from a guy who, I think is probably a top 5 or 6 quarterback. But, I mean, how concerned are we about the Bengals and I guess more specifically, maybe Joe Burrow?
I mean, I'm going with a 6 here. And I wanted to go a little higher, but I'm letting the better angel on my shoulder persist here. They kind of feel like the inverse Dolphins at this point, where they're bad to start the year.
Joe Burrow's record in the first 2 weeks of the season?
What is it?
1-8 in his career in the first 2 weeks of the season.
Oh my God.
So they just do this every year, and they've mostly figured it out.
That is insane. What I will say is they were missing 2 defensive tackles, and that showed up in the run game, which is how New England was able to control the game. And
but okay. The Patriots were running to the right every time. It's guys, they're running to the right and they're throwing 6-yard passes. this is not that hard to stop.
In NCAA, you shift right, run right, and your defense will key up on it. And if I'm giving you defensive advice in NCAA Bengals, you need some help. But what I will say is, I don't know how you don't get more involved with Jamar Chase in this game. Like, there was some refusal, and I know Christian Gonzalez is like an ascending corner and has done a good job in his limited career, but they didn't drop a single big play. And even like Chase Brown, who's a big play machine on this team, got very limited action. And
I sent you 2 clips. I sent you 2 clips last night on their final drive. Chase open on a deep out, and Chase open enough to give him a shot on a post route against single high. And Joe Burrow kind of got happy feet. You know, his eyes went down and dumped it down both plays when there was really not pressure. I mean, I don't have the stat in front of me anymore, but what do you remember the stat I sent you where it was like the third lowest pressure game or something that like of his career? So like he did not get pressured in this game. It was not that. It was not a they cannot protect him game. It was a Joe Burrow is not looking down the field, doesn't want to look down the field game.
Well, and like the last thing I'll add there, and this wasn't an offseason storyline I really cared about, but their OC is Dan Pitchner, who was their QB's coach previously. And what we saw last year when Burrow went out and this offense was productive was Zach Taylor doing things that we know Joe Burrow doesn't like: motion, play action under pistol and under center. And they didn't do those things again. And now I'm not going to call him Joe Burrow's buddy, but he's been his QB coach for the last 3 years, and he's now calling the plays. And they're going to call what Joe wants. But at some point, like, there have to be adults in the room who, like, this offense isn't working this way, and we have to change it up. And that's my concern, is that if we get into the next couple of weeks and they're still doing this, shotgun play, read the field, no motion, I'm getting a little concerned about the Bengals.
Yeah, they were in the bottom 5 or so in motion. So what you're saying is New England offensive coordinator Alex Van Pelt outcoached his counterpart in this game.
We are like 10 for 10 for Alex Van Pelt. I didn't even think we were going to get it. But yeah, we are. And the last thing is their signing of Trent Brown, he was terrible.
Yeah.
He was so terrible. There were plays he fell down in the pass rush. And Amarius Mims is torn pec and isn't going to be back for 6 or 7 more weeks. Like, it could be a long season for Cincinnati, and that would make no one more happy than me. I'm still leaving it at 6 because it's hard for an offense with this many weapons to fail. But if they don't come out against Kansas City, which is probably a better defense than New England, they're going to have some significant questions going into week 3.
Yeah, I mean, I'm at a 4, and I guess, we should mention T. Higgins did not play, had the hamstring thing. It's only Tuesday. I haven't heard or seen anything about T. Higgins in relation to his health, how long he's going to be out, if he's playing this week, whatever.
Schefter said he was doubtful.
Really, for week 2? Boy, that's
He said he was fine 2 weeks ago.
Yeah, players lie about that stuff. Also, JJ McCarthy thought he was fine, and it turns out he tore his meniscus. So, like, players don't always know. Although hamstring, I feel like more often than a knee injury. But honestly, the thing so I have it at 4, and I'm with you on basically everything. It's just for me, like, they kind of do this every year. Wake me up in week 6 if they're like 2-4, and we still feel bad about how this offense is moving. But the thing that kind of scared me, did you happen to catch some of the camera shots of Joe Burrow in this game?
Well, and that, like, him holding the Gatorade bottle and
not even just more just like him flexing his wrist. And this is so dumb, but I'm not saying like to make a big deal of this, but he was doing it a lot. And I don't know. I saw that and I was like, man, this seems a little bit strange. It's just a little bit uncomfortable for me.
Well, and right now. We've seen this before where we kind of write off medical issues in the offseason as a non-issue, which I think generally is good practice. But like 2 years ago, if we remember, Matt Stafford had a back issue and a lot of people wrote it off, and he played a few games, and then it became a bigger issue because he didn't look right and he didn't finish the season. I'm not saying that's happening with Joe Burrow. What I am saying is, if you're telling me that was 100% Joe Burrow, I'm telling you he's a bottom 16 quarterback in the league now. So there's something wrong, whether it's with his offense or with Joe Burrow's health.
And he hasn't played a game, for 11 months now. So part of it could be rust too. But yeah, just, I don't know. I would say I'm at a 4, but I'm at a 4, but on edge about what I see in these next couple of weeks. All right, let's move to Las Vegas. Go a little bit out of order here on this list. Get this one out of the way. Let you do a little victory lap. I know you want it. Zamir White, Dalton. Alexander Madison played more snaps. It was 36-23. It was still Zamir White with more touches, but I mean, they didn't draft him to have 15 touches, Dalton.
Well, part of my concern is the usage because it was close to a 50-50 snap share. I think it was 56-44. My bigger concern is this isn't the Antonio Pierce we were promised. Twice on 4th and 1.
I was gonna say, you mean punting on 4th and 1 on his opponent's side of the field with 6 minutes left. It was a 99th percentile on the surrender index since 1999. There probably will not be a worse punt all year than that one. And this is Mr. Smash Mouth football, by the way.
Yeah, so you run that, and then they have a 4th and 1 where they end up electing to kick a field goal, but there was no smash mouth football. Zamir White was what we expected in the passing game, which is a 0. And for a Chargers offense, we aren't expecting to be great this year. They put them in it wasn't even a horribly negative game script. It was a 6-point differential.
Well, the Raiders were actually ahead for a lot of this game. They were ahead at halftime. It was 9-7 through 3 quarters. So they even got a game script where he could have run Zamir White 25 times.
Yeah, and they didn't. And now we have the mid-off of running backs between Madison and Zamir White on who can be more mid and be worth a middle round pick. And it's just concerning because the Raiders aren't going to play a lot more teams that have offenses that are this poor. And that's not to disregard the Chargers, but that's not a creative offense we saw out there. It was Greg Roman's offense and we knew what it was and they ran the ball. And I mean, they got out hard-nosed football by a Chargers team that last year was the worst in the league in run rate. So you have to be pretty concerned going forward that the Raiders might not be smash mouth. And Antonio Pierce is one of those guys that's on my early season hot list for coach firings if this doesn't work out.
Dalton thinks he's hot and he might get fired. Noted. I mean, yeah, I'm at a 9 for anybody who wanted this guy to be a starting running back for fantasy teams. That's obviously not where I ranked him, not where you ranked him, but for the general ADP, I would say a 9 for all the reasons that you said. Before we move on from this game, I just want to shout out J.K. Dobbins. Just so cool to see him back and able to play well. I know the long speed wasn't there. Maybe it never will be. And while that's a bummer, he doesn't have to have that to be the RB18 this year. Well, I mean, he had 10 carries, 11 carries, had a big run, had a touchdown, looked so much better than Gus Edwards, probably most importantly in this game as well. Just so happy to see him back and playing pretty well.
Well, I don't know if you caught my victory lapping, but my best ball exposure is 37% Saquon, 37% Jonathan Taylor, and 37% J.K. Dobbins. So I'm feeling really good about that free square I was getting in June and July at J.K. Dobbins' last pick of the draft at this point.
Yeah, I mean, we know how it goes. The injury could happen literally any time and the rug's pulled from under us. But just wanted to say it was cool to see a guy who has had 2 of the worst injuries you can have in sports, probably. And he's out there at one of the more demanding positions. And he played well. So that was cool to see. Okay. Marvin Harrison Jr. of the Arizona Cardinals, Dalton. He had 1 reception for 4 yards on 4 targets. Where are we at here, panic meter?
Personally, I'm at a 2 because I wasn't drafting him in the second round.
Exactly what I was gonna say.
And better days are gonna come. I know the Bills defense is missing a lot of people, but Brian Dabble has always coached up that unit. Even last year in the second half, when a lot of guys went down with injuries, they figured it out. And they ran a good game plan in this game. I know a lot of people are upset about Kyler, about the open Marvin Harrison Jr. play that he didn't throw him to that would have been a touchdown. I think you need to rewatch the play and realize that he pump faked and the corner bit, and then at that point he had pressure on that side and had to readjust to not get sacked.
It it was just kind of unlucky. Like the timing of how things happened was a little bit unlucky on that play.
Yeah, and I think better days are ahead for Marvin Harrison Jr., but he still is a rookie in the NFL, getting accustomed to this offense. And there are some concerning things. If you look at average separation, which is the fantasy points metric, which they have an acronym for that I won't repeat on the podcast, Marvin Harrison Jr. was the worst of all starting rookie wide receivers. So, and again, separation wasn't his game in college either. He was a ball winner. He was good at getting up and getting it. And I mean, it's just going to be a rough road. And this is why Evan and I were down on where he was being picked. It's just not a guy that you could expect to come out there and produce right away, nor should you expect that of any rookie, despite some of their performances.
Yeah, I was going to say, like, he started slow. He's a rookie. That should be the expectation, not a surprise if he does. I'm at a 4, and, you know, like, yes, I wasn't ranking him as the 30th overall pick or whatever. He ended up finally going at the end. So I'm grading it like on a scale in between that and my own. I still think he'll be like a top 24 to 30 receiver, you know, but like I will say the one thing that at least has me a little bit concerned, I saw the stat from Jacob Gibbs on Twitter. His average depth on his routes, on his average depth of route, which measures how far down the field he was on his first cut on his route, was like 12.3 yards. The only two guys in the league with a higher depth in week 1 were Gabe Davis and Alec Pierce. He was basically a pure X. And while he's going to have weeks with more than 4 targets, 1 catch for 4 yards, obviously, but that doesn't lend itself to being the first read incredibly often, if that's his usage going forward. Not saying it will be, but just like something to keep an eye on is he just a pure X always, or do they work him in the more things in this offense? I think they will, but it was just at least a little bit of a concerning start from that standpoint for me.
Yeah, I mean, it's not the start he was drafted for. Like you said, there are better days ahead. There are also harder days ahead because he is the alpha, and they're going to key in on him every play, every game.
Yeah, and it wasn't just him. Michael Wilson had like 1 catch himself. So they're X receivers. Neither one of them did anything. It was
the Dortch show.
It was Dortch, and it was Trey McBride on the short over the middle stuff. And then it was the run game. But I thought Kyler Murray looked pretty good. So like long term, you know, Murray looked good. I think Marvin Harrison Jr. will be fine. Like, I think it'll be okay. I think we're okay here. Okay. Amon-Ra St. Brown. I mean, 3 for 13 on 6 targets. And this is a guy who I think he's probably been the most consistent player in fantasy football, like non-quarterback, the last 2 years. And it's a little bit of a shock to see this kind of stat line from him, but I'm still just at a 2. What I will say, so a couple things. Number one, like, we need to actually give this Jameson Williams thing a little more time to see how real it is, how good he is. Can he do this on a consistent basis? But the fact that he did it for 1 week, and specifically that route on, I think it was Tre'Davious White, where Tre'Davious White tried to grab him and literally couldn't because he got dusted so bad. Like, that was impressive. It was clearly his best game as a pro, Jameson Williams. But so I think 2 things will happen if this is real for Jameson Williams. Number one, Amon-Ra St. Brown may not be as consistent of a player with an X receiver who's actually good and can command volume. And, you know, the same goes for Laporta too. Like, there may be a little bit more give and take on a week-to-week basis. I do think the end result will probably look about the same for Amon-Ra this year, because I think he will have bigger blow-up games with a little bit more room to work underneath. Like, think about what Xavier Worthy did for Rashee Rice just by being on the field, being a threat, opening up that underneath stuff. Like, I think we've talked about this before with Amon-Ra and the Lions. If JMO could ever get his head on straight, like, if he is good, we're going to see a lot of that this year too. It just may be a little bit less predictable than the 8 for 85 that we were getting every week for Amon-Ra the last 2 years.
Yeah, and I'm at a 1 here. I'm not concerned. I'm stealing this from Scott Barrett in his Fantasy Suite article. But Amon-Ra, when shadowed by Trey White, it's funny you just talked bad about him, but he locked out Amon-Ra. Amon-Ra had 4 targets for 1 catch against Trey White, and those other 2 catches came when Trey White wasn't in coverage. Also, from that Fantasy Points article, Amon St. Brown saw a total of 48% of his coverages bracketed over the middle of the field.
Mm-hmm.
Like the Rams' game plan was show us who else can beat us. And for what it's worth, J-Mo was able to do it.
Yep.
And that's just how the cookie crumbles. But now not every offense can do that, because what the Lions did is they were like, we do have another weapon and we can use them. And just like you were saying, it's going to reopen that middle of the field, because last year, Jared Goff, Laporta, and Amon St. Brown were so successful with what they were able to do in the middle of the field that that's where defenses are going to start with their coverages. But if the Lions force defenses to adjust, they can go back to their bread and butter. So, yeah, it's a bad game, but every wide receiver has those. And finally, Mr. Consistent wasn't consistent for a week. Like, I'm not going to lose much sleep over that.
Yeah, and I would be remiss if I didn't say this is a little, like, this is not 100% applicable, but this is kind of, as you were talking, I was like, oh, this is kind of the Mark Andrews conversation too, where the Chiefs completely bracketed him. That game, it doesn't even feel like that game was part of week one. It was so long ago. But the Chiefs bracketed him, took him away, said to the Ravens, okay, you're going to have to beat us with these dump downs to Zay Flowers, to Isaiah Likely. And they said, okay, we're going to try and do that. And with Andrews, there's a little bit more concern to me just with how he looked physically than like Amon-Ra, who he looked fine. He just wasn't getting the ball. But by and large, I think Andrews will be fine too. Like the Chiefs were bracketing him a lot and taking him away. And that just won't be an every week thing. And I mean, the Ravens O-line did not fare well. Maybe that'll be an every week thing, but probably not quite to the extent of what Chris Jones was doing at different points of that game. And weirdly, Tershawn Wharton at different points of that game against the Chiefs.
Yeah, and I think that's a good comparison. And what we do sometimes in week one is we overweight performances. I would always recommend, if there's a guy who's proven that they're great at football, you probably don't overweight one goose egg with their performance, and that I'm more likely to underweight surprising performances from players who haven't done well historically, i.e. Jameson Williams, who I hope continues to be this explosive because it's fun for the league.
Yeah.
But I'm not going to like put all my eggs in that basket saying he's going to be this field stretching machine every week.
So this last guy, Dalton, he has a history of being amazing. He has a more recent history of being horrendous. He was horrendous in week one. Deshaun Watson, like, where do we even start with this dude, man? 24 of 45, 169 yards, 1 touchdown, 2 interceptions. I'm not going to be able to convey this exact stat correctly because there was not enough context in the tweet. But what you need to know is based on like his passing yard, like his attempts and his QB rate and like all of that stuff kind of mashed together. According to whatever stat this spit out, this was the 6th worst game in NFL history with this many pass attempts. Which, you know what? I believe it with how bad Deshaun Watson looked. I'm going 10. And like, I've seen mostly negative with Deshaun, which is great. I think there are still some corners of Cleveland Twitter that are making it to my timeline that are trying to defend him or, just cope with what's happening. He's missing his 2 starting tackles, blah, blah, blah. It's like, no Nick Chubb. We just saw Joe Flacco step into this offense last year and produce. Like, Deshaun Watson has been nothing but a terrible quarterback since he's put on a Cleveland Browns uniform. His accuracy once he has to throw the ball down the field is just horrendous. He was 0 of 10 on passes of 15 air yards or more on Sunday per CBS. His air yards per completion were 2.6. His QB rating was under 10. And like, yeah, this is just week one. And sure, he may have had a good statistical last 2 or 3 games of his season before his shoulder injury last year. But oh my God, man, we are at a multi-year sample size of this guy being garbage. And the crowd was booing him quickly. And Jameis Winston, I am ready to see you play, young man.
I mean, and I'm with you. It's a 10. Like I said earlier, when I have nothing at work, I watch all 22. This was another game, just like the Panthers game, that I didn't get to see a lot of because it got out of hand so quickly on Red Zone on Sunday. So I went back and I was just like, you know what? Let's just do our due diligence here. And maybe the Cowboys were being exotic and really throwing Watson off. They weren't. Deshaun Watson, I mean, he is folding under simulated and no pressures like he's Sam Darnold against the Patriots 3 years ago. Like he's seeing ghosts out there. There are multiple plays where he has multiple reads open in the short. He takes a long pass and vice versa. He's tanked everybody's value. Like there were moments where Elijah Moore and Jerry Jeudy were looking like good. And this should be a defense going forward that can keep them in games. And what made Joe Flacco special about them last year is that they were explosive. He turned over the ball a lot, but they were also explosive on offense. And then they relied on their defense to win them the games. The problem with Watson is he's doing neither. He's not explosive. He's turning the ball over. And it's just by the end of it, is there a player you're going to trust to start week in, week out on this Browns offense? I don't even think I could trust Amari at this point.
Yeah,
Amari was home, by the way. Amari Cooper home and away splits are very, very easy things to pick on. And Amari Cooper at home just didn't perform. Like, that's how you know you have terrible quarterback play.
Yeah, and no Njoku for at least a little bit now. He got injured, left the game early, and no Nick Chubb there still. So it's like, there's nobody you want to start here. And is he the worst quarterback on their roster? They have Jameis Winston and
Pro Bowler.
And then DTR, Dorian Thompson-Robinson, I think, is still around too. Like, I would rather see any of those guys on the field over Deshaun Watson right now, which, like, imagine saying that in 2020 where it was like, man, Mahomes is really good, but, like, this Deshaun Watson, he is right on his heels, man. Like, it is a travesty the Texans went 4 and whatever because this guy was amazing this year, and it just looked nothing.
When he plays football on Sunday, it will have been 1,400 days since his last 300 passing yard performance.
Wow.
And this is not a bad Browns offense. Like,
no.
And that's the worst part of it is that
good personnel. I know they're missing their tackles, but by and large, good personnel. They proved they could do it without tackles last year. Good personnel and good coaching. Like we know this is good offensive coaching.
Yeah.
Even if they did get rid of Alex Van Pelt.
Poor Alex Van Pelt. He fell the dagger that is Deshaun Watson. But this has got to go down as the worst contract in NFL history. Like,
dude,
even
this might be the worst trade in professional sports history.
Yeah, and this is one of the players I was worried I was wrong about. I'm no longer worried. I'm very confident he sucks. And not only does he suck, like he is like borderline Peterman play at this point. Like, other than throwing 6 picks in a game, he's right there. And it sucks because, like, Bryce Young was bad, but Bryce Young we have hope for. Yeah. And there's something to watch with that offense. But this is terrible for the NFL product that we're putting on the field.
Well, it's like just for the Browns, they've had a Super Bowl caliber supporting cast for now 3-4 years. And they had Baker, who I don't think would have got them there, but they were in the playoffs with him. And Baker was like a god in week 1. And Johnny sent us this tweet in our group where it's like only the Browns would trade for Deshaun Watson and then Baker Mayfield would magically become better than him. And it's like, it is just crazy because Baker Mayfield was about where Bryce Young is now at around, 4 years ago before they had the resurgent playoff year. So, just because Bryce Young's bad now doesn't mean he is forever. I do think Deshaun Watson might be bad forever because it's been a long time now.
Yeah, I mean, even if he puts together like a 300-yard, 3-touchdown passing performance, I need like 5 weeks of above average play before I'm even going to start pretending like he's good.
Yeah. Agreed, Dalton. Anything to add or we get out of here ahead of week 2?
Are we going to jump to dynasty stock?
Oh my gosh, yes, dynasty stock. So I didn't mention this at the top of the show. We're just going to real quickly each give one player whose dynasty stock, I guess we said went down, right? I actually got the right one down, but I'll get one off the top of my head here. One dynasty stock who went down the most in week 1.
So mine's probably a little controversial, but just based on preseason hype and last season hype, I am finally concerned about Jackson Smith-Njigba, somebody who I would have probably traded for all offseason. So let me start with the positives last week. He was the second receiver in 2 receiver sets. He outsnapped Tyler Lockett. He had more routes than Tyler Lockett. he was the complementary part to DK Metcalf. The bad part, he was fourth on the team in 4-3 target share behind Tyler Lockett, DK Metcalf, and Noah Fant. His first read target share was 5%. His separation rate on the team was the worst among all wide receivers, including Jake Bobo, who saw 7 snaps. Now, that's probably an inflated sample size, but it's concerning when he's averaging 0.8 yards of separation per play for a player that we considered a route runner. He also wasn't a screen merchant. He had at least an 8-yard average depth of target and only saw 2 targets. And then from fantasy stats and data, he only saw 1 screenplay. So we changed the offense. The offense looked different. It was Ryan Grubb's offense, but somehow we still didn't get a Jackson Smith-Njigba game where DK Metcalf saw a ton of the Patrick Surtain coverages. And then the person who we write off every year, Tyler Lockett, comes out there and is Mr. Reliable and is the guy that Geno Smith looks to as his top first read target share option. So it's just, I know he's a talented player, but it's hard to continually make excuses for him and believe that it's going to show up on the field when we're in year 2 now. We're still not seeing it on the field. And eventually he has to put something together that makes you believe in him. This was a player going into the offseason I would have traded a fantasy first for. This is a player at this point I would trade a second for. But if this keeps up, his stock is just going to keep going down.
Yeah, I mean, eventually Tyler Lockett will not be there and he'll just like play and produce more probably. But I mean, that's not what we were hoping for a week ago. And I still have hope that that's not going to be like what I'm hoping for JSN going forward. Like he can produce, but yeah, you're right. We haven't seen it. And it is concerning that, I mean, we just, it's just so crazy because this guy felt like, in a pretty mid receiver class, it was like, oh, well, he may not have the upside of some of these other wide receiver ones, but like he is going to be a good NFL receiver. And
there are other like a Jarvis Landry, get 8 targets a game for 60 yards, and you're feeling good.
And he just hasn't been able to carve that rollout. And yeah, you're right. Like that's what's concerning is that for him, he does need to be a volume guy to truly give you like wide receiver 2 type of production. And even wide receiver 2 type of production it's good. It's just not quite what you hoped for when you drafted them at 1-1 or 1-2, whatever, in your fantasy league.
You just can't ask for a better situation where Tyler Lockett's questionable coming into the game and JSN plays in 2 receiver sets and he just puts up, a goose egg essentially. It's 2 for 19.
Yeah. So can I give you a much lower stakes, but equally frustrating to me player?
Yes.
So as I go to Rowdy's roster in our Dynasty League to pull up his snap share, any guesses on what percentage of the team snaps Marvin Mims played on Sunday?
I actually saw a tweet. Was it like 19%?
17% of the team snaps. 1 target, no catches, no yards, no stats in the game. And, this was a guy that Sean Payton drafted, and that seems to be where the interest stopped with getting Marvin Mims on the field. And his reception perception was not pretty from his rookie year. So, like, he didn't – the stats aren't there, but the underlying stuff wasn't even there when he got on the field last year. And it was like, well, if he could, like, I was just kind of hoping, like, can he at least get on the field, even if he doesn't have a productive day? Can we at least see a guy who has earned his way on the field in year 2 on offense that is probably challenging the Patriots for worst skill position group in the league? He can't get on the field for this group. Like, Sky Moore has produced, I think, as much or more than him, but it's a little bit Sky Moore-ish where it's like, man, the chances are there. Sky Moore at least got those chances. Marvin Mims can't even get those chances. And I'm just concerned that we've gone from a guy who was a second-round pick in fantasy drafts, in rookie drafts, who we both liked, where it's like, when's he droppable off your dynasty roster? Like if Rowdy dropped him right now in our league, I'm not picking him up. And like, that may be too much stock to put in the week 1, but I just really need to see him at least be on the field a little bit. He's just a complete afterthought in a terrible skill position group with a very terrible quarterback through week one. Shout out to the guy who said that if Bo Nix lives up to his ceiling, the Broncos could be close to a playoff team. I don't think that's going to happen.
Well, and I mean, maybe his ceiling just wasn't realized yet. But it's frustrating because in the preseason, Sean Payton ran Tim Patrick with the ones to get experience with Nix.
And then he's gone.
And then he cut. And then they bring in undrafted free agent Devon Vele, who goes 8 for 8 in targets and starts over Marvin Mims. So the guy hasn't got chances twice. And then he's playing out there as a kick returner, and that's really about the extent of it. And like you said, I mean, little Jordan Humphrey was on the field for more snaps last week than Marvin Mims.
Guys, that's not him being derogatory. His name is literally Little Jordan Humphrey.
That's literally his name. And the Sean Payton experiment in Denver, I know, like, we wrote off last year because Russ was there, but like week one, it was a god-awful performance all around. I mean, this is also a guy who like fed Jaleel McLaughlin 5 catches for -1 yards. Like, there are a lot of things to be concerned about this offense.
We said they're going to throw it to their running backs. We did not promise yards.
Yes. But like now, not only does he have to get on the field, but he has to get on the field and be productive in a bad offense. Like, you're asking for a lot of leeway. And this is a coach that the Broncos can't really give up on. They paid a first-round pick for him. They paid him a ton of money. And if they're out on him, like, this is the second whiff by the GM after the Wilson trade. Like, you have to ask yourself, like, where's the upside with Marvin Mims? Because we're not seeing it.
Yeah, and I mean, even if he does get on the field, like, I think Bo Nix's average depth of target was like 3.6 or something like that. He threw a pick that was so bad. Did you happen to catch this? He threw a pick that was so bad in the triple coverage. The announcer said, "Oh no," before it even got picked off, while it was in the air, because it was that obvious he was covered right away when he threw the ball. So just all around, not great in Denver in week one. Not great for Marvin Mims long term. Not feeling good things about where this is heading for him. Okay, now for real this time. Anything else to add before we hop out of here?
I think we're good to go.
All righty, that is going to do it for episode 152 of the Half Point Per Podcast. Give us a follow, Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok at Half Point Per Pod. Subscribe on YouTube at Half Point Per Podcast. The link to all of those things will be in the show notes as always. The show is available anywhere you listen to podcasts, Spotify, Apple, all that. Leave us a 5-star review. And thank you all again so much for listening today. And we'll talk to you again next week.